Grief can be exhausting, and it depletes us, smothers us in things to do that we have to do. It drains our energy with all of this stuff that we've got and going on. It sucks our desire out for life and the things that need to be done. And yet, grief requires that we continue to engage with it and continue to address it and to keep reaching down into our well that gets lower and lower and lower. I'm so glad that you've joined us here on Journeys Through Grief for this seminar, Nurturing Yourself Through Grief. It's really important to know and to understand. And I invite you to post things in the questions in the chat box. We'll get to them, react, and all. You're gonna have a lot to react to here with my good friend Michelle Post. She is what I call a self-care guru. She's at least my self-care guru. I've learned a lot from her and everything. She's developed her own patterns with that. She invites, as a therapist, other people to enter into these processes and to help enable themselves to meet all the requirements of grief. I think you're going to learn so very much in this seminar here. Michelle, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Galen. It's a joy to be with you specifically and to hopefully help other people through our conversation today. And thank you to Forest Lawn and Journeys Through Grief for hosting us tonight. It's great service you're providing to the community. It's very inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah. So simply, why is it important to care for ourselves while we grieve?
I was thinking about how grief kind of interlaces with self-care and the importance of it. And the quote that comes to mind for me is a quote from Henry Maudsley, who was a psychiatrist in the early 1900s. And he said, "The sorrow that has no vent in tears may make other organs weep."
Ooh.
Implying that, what we hold in, what we don't release, what we don't take care of can make our body sick. And what we know from research about brain chemistry when we're grieving and the long-term effect of stress, unlike an instant stressor, you almost get in a car accident and then the car accident is over and you kind of forget about it over time. Grief is extended. And so it's an extended period of stress on the body. And what we know about those integrative diseases that are stress caused is that the only way to mitigate that is to build our own toolkit for self-care.
Yeah.
And early in my career, I started off not as a specialist in grief and loss. I've been specializing in grief and loss for about 21 years now. But my first few years, I was in chronic pain. And I noticed all the losses. People had different kinds of losses, not through death, from disability, from early retirement. And I would do this grief and loss kind of timeline just out of curiosity, how they adjusted to life with their disability. And I found early, anecdotally, that so many of my chronic pain patients had deaths or traumas early in their life that they had never sought therapy for, never sought treatment for, either didn't feel like they had the resources or didn't feel like they had the support from their friends or their family or their community to enter into therapy. And here they were years later and their body was no longer healing.
Yeah, wow.
And so I thought, if I could work with people soon after the death of their loved one and teach them how to integrate self-care throughout that stress, that maybe I could help prevent some of those long-term disabilities, those long-term physical ailments that come from unprocessed grief and loss.
Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like literally all of this stress just hangs in the body and just begins to start crumpling things down. Would that be a good image?
Yes. Your
just like a piece of
neurochemistry
paper.
changes. Your neurochemistry changes. It affects cortisol in your body. It affects how fast your heart rate is going, your blood pressure, your sleep. your appetite, like all of these. Some people
Hmm.
get gastrointestinal changes through grief and loss. It's an incredible stress. The closer the person, the more things they did for you in your life, the more kind of difficult or complex the grief is, the more the stress can be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so to integrate this, to release it, to process it, to work through some of these things, what does that look like as self-care? You
Mhm.
go like the slide we had. I went looking for self-care and everything. And normally all the slides are the pictures, and what our images are here's somebody sitting there going,
Um,
and yoga and all that kind of stuff, but
which is
how
great.
does how does somebody find what's right for them? Because that's
Yeah.
not what it is for all of us, is it?
No, 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 no. Yoga has incredible a combination of physical movement, stretching, and
Mhm.
breath work and breathing. So, of course, it takes breath work, which you can do outside of yoga,
Yeah.
stretching, which you can do with your physical therapist or on your own or watching YouTube, and physical activity, which you could do with a walk around the block. It doesn't have to be in a
Okay.
yoga studio, in the combination of yoga. If that doesn't fit with you. Maybe
Yeah.
not everybody wants to sit in a room full of sweaty other people, on a yoga mat, right?
I have a
Um,
hard time getting on the floor, and
or
stuff.
you have a
So,
hard time getting on the floor.
yeah.
So that's not everybody's. And the reality is also we hear a lot about those sort of massages or your pedicure, whenever you go to a
Hmm.
self-care workshop, even if you weren't grieving, let's say you're in your own career somehow and you go to a self-care stress management workshop. Oh, drink tea, and that's good. Drink tea and get a pedicure. That's good. Great. Get a pedicure. Get a massage. Yeah. But the trick with self care, real effective self care, is take the time you need to create the life that you want to be living.
Mm.
Self care is not taking the time to escape the life you are living.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Mm.
So the challenge with that in grief is, of course, you want to escape the life that you're living. You want to escape your pain.
Sure.
And of course, kind of the only way to stop the pain would be to have a time machine or the ability to raise your loved one from the dead. That we haven't figured out how to do that yet.
No.
So we
Hmm.
can't, that is not going to be our solution. So of course there's going to be some escaping the life you're currently living.
Sure. Hmm.
But if you look outside the grief at everything else in your life, career, home, community, friends, family, hobbies, and you look at everything else aside from the grief and say, okay, what do I want to create for my life going forward now that
Hmm.
I don't have the ability to bring this person back to life? What else do I want my life to look like? And so, if you want your life to look like a massage once a month, and that's a part of your life, then that's great. But
Okay.
that's not the sum and substance of self care.
Right.
If you go to deep tissue massage and physical therapy, so it stretches you so that you can travel, so that you can do the fun things you like to do, so that you can walk with your friends more often, or you can get down on the floor and try yoga all of a sudden if you
Mhm.
start
Yeah.
stretching,
Yeah.
then that may be the thing that you spend your time and your resources doing so that you create the life you want.
Hmm.
Maybe you want to learn a new hobby. Pickleball is hot right now, right? So
Yeah.
some people want to learn a new hobby. Or maybe you miss reading and your concentration is poor. So if you take some breath work classes and can get your stress level down, you may be able to concentrate more and be able to read and enjoy reading again. Or maybe you really have noticed going through the process of grief that you don't have enough good friends and you haven't spent enough time nurturing deep, honest, genuine friendships.
Sure.
And so taking the time to find people and find your tribe is going to be your self care.
Yeah.
So it is different for every person.
Sure.
What brings you joy? Just like there's, I don't know, 31 flavors at 31 flavors ice cream, and not
Yeah.
everybody gets the same flavor. Not everybody
Right.
likes vanilla.
Right.
Your version of self care is unique, it's personal
Mm.
to you. There's some main components or umbrellas you want to pay attention to that have to do with health and fiscal security and social support. but how you do that is very unique to you as an individual, as unique as your favorite ice cream flavor or your fingerprints or your iris in your eye. Very unique to you.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. And it really, it does take this, a bit of time and thought to really expand,
Mm-hmm.
your thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
to look into, one of the to look in forward to your life.
Yes.
And as grieving people, that's one of the things that we have to do, is to contemplate in some ways a life moving forward
Mm-hmm.
that helps to draw us in. And I can see
Mm-hmm.
how even just figuring, starting to spend a little bit of time to think about this really can help us to move
Mm-hmm.
through some of that stuff.
Yeah, not get over,
Right?
right?
No,
It's
no,
not
no.
closure, right?
Mm-mm.
It's just walk
Yep.
through. What is the Winston Churchill quote that I love? If you find yourself in hell, keep going. Don't hang. And then I usually add, don't hang out with the locals or make cocktails. Like just, just keep going. And grief is a form of our own personal hell for most of
Right.
us. So
Sure.
just one day at a time, keep going through that day. What do you need to do to take care of yourself to get through that day?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're here in right now in August, and folks are, kids are heading back to school.
Oh
Some
yeah.
schools, here in Los Angeles just started this week, and things are within the next couple, and a portion of those kids going back to school are grieving
Mm-hmm.
kids. There always is.
Yes, yes, yes.
And children need a supportive parent
Right.
to be able to grieve well. We know that.
Yes, yes, we do.
How is it for parents that participating in good self-care can help them support their grieving children?
Right. Well, from a young age, I identify as a woman. I am a woman. From a young age, women are taught to have little baby dolls in our strollers and to be
Okay.
caregivers. Okay. Depending on your religion, right, you're taught to be selfless or giving, 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 giving.
Mm-hmm.
But just like the airplane, you're of no help to somebody if you're passed out
Yep.
in the plane. You need to have your own oxygen mask on first. Then, with your surplus, you can be of service. It does. Sometimes self care is volunteering and helping other people to get
Mm.
yourself to the point where you realize you do matter to other people. You can make a
Mm.
contribution to other people. That people would miss you,
Yep.
and if you were not here, that can be an important part of some people's self care. It's part of my self care,
Mm-hmm.
volunteering, being of service, but I do it when I have enough overflow in my own life that I don't feel depleted.
Yep.
And it's the same is true with children. So, coming full circle with children, the longitudinal research out of the Harvard NIH grant from the 80s
Yeah.
talks about the best thing you can do for children who are grieving is make sure that the parent or guardian taking care of them is cared for.
Yeah.
So that means if only one person in the family can get therapy or a support group due to time or resources, it needs to be the surviving parent or guardian. If only one person can have the extra self care, it's totally not intuitive because what do? Sacrifice as a parent, you
Yep.
sacrifice
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
Oh, I don't need to play sports. I'll put everything into my child's sports. I don't need to do art or take art classes, everything into my child's art class, everything for my child. But guess what you're doing? You are actually recreating a pattern for your children that they are then going to learn as adult parents, not to be able to give to themselves when they're parents.
Yep.
You're modeling for them self sacrifice and not balance. Because am I also saying
Mm.
that you need to be on the pedestal and you matter
Mm-hmm. Yep.
100% and your children get nothing and they're home with the babysitter 24/7 and no, it's balance, right? So the balance between let me show you that I matter as a parent and that I need care. Therefore, you also need care. I'm modeling for you in grief that you need to take care of yourself. Maybe for my child, it's coloring. And for me, it's paint by number, or, an art
Yeah.
class, or time with my friend.
Mm-hmm.
But we're modeling for our children all the time that taking care of ourselves is appropriate. And then we take that into our workforce, and we take that into our world moving forward, and into our relationships. And we create balance in our relationships,
Yeah.
as opposed to set us up to be taken advantage of in life by people who only want to take from
Yep.
us. Friends want to take from us, family who wants to take from us, bosses who want to take from us.
Mm-hmm.
We set ourselves up to just be victimized,
Yeah.
right? And you
Mm-hmm.
want to teach your children how to be assertive, confident, how to ask for their needs to be met, how to ask for help, how to receive help. That's all a part of parenting. And by
Sure.
taking care of yourself, you model that for your children.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think as a follow-up question with that, many of us are not very compassionate with ourselves. That's the
Right.
way I would put it. Okay. All right. And as you mentioned, we're taught to meet other people's needs. And again, especially women are
Mhm.
mothers, wives,
Christians,
uh,
Muslims, like
caregivers.
built into the faith,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
You matter not.
So while I hear you with what you're saying and all, there are some lot of old tapes
Old
maybe
tape.
that are underneath. How can we begin to value ourselves enough, which is a part of
Right,
self-care,
right,
I
right.
think. How can we learn to maybe listen to those voices, but find some new strength to understand that our needs need to
Matter
come first
too.
at some times.
Yeah, matter too. They matter too,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right? Not matter only, but matter
right.
too. Well, so let me see. I'm going to reference John Bradshaw's work, who was a part of creating adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. It was a spin-off
Mm.
of AA.
Yeah, 12-step group, right.
It's a
Mm-hmm,
12
mm-hmm.
step group, and it's all based off of what we ourselves didn't get as children.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, to make this make sense, I want each of you listening to think about, did I get 100% of everything I needed before I turned 18? Did I get all the training? Did I get all the love? Did my parent have 100? Probably your parents didn't have 100% time for you. We know what the previous generation was going through. It's hard to balance
Right.
life and parenthood. So, did you get all the messaging you needed to? Did you get permission to cry? Did you get permission to be strong? Did you get the support that you needed to pursue a particular thing that you love? Or were you
Mm-hmm.
pressured into being an accountant or an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer?
Right.
Did you have freedom in that or not? And if you can honestly say, I got everything I needed from my parents, I feel 100% whole, I don't need anyone to complete me, then this question doesn't really apply to you, because you
Right.
probably have good balance. But John Bradshaw would say 80% of us came from dysfunctional homes
Yeah. 80%. Wow. Yeah.
in some
In
level.
one form or another.
One
Yeah.
level. And it might not have been intentionally dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been, we were, in my family, we were so poor. My parents had to work all the time. So I was a classic latchkey kid,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if I needed a parent to help me with my homework, too bad, so sad.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because my parents weren't good people. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
my dad was a minister.
Right.
He gave entirely of himself to the church his whole life. My mother worked and gave to the ministry her whole life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, what did that set me up for? Number one, my needs don't matter. Everyone else's needs don't
Yeah.
matter, right? Number two, it also set me up to just think that I was being selfish anytime I needed to do one little thing to help me, right? And that's not balance.
Correct.
Jesus took 40 days in the desert by himself. Moses, how many examples
Yeah.
in our biblical or other religions do we see people taking respite?
Right.
Do they take retreat? Do they
Mm-hmm.
go and meditate on their own or spend time on their own? You know, there's example after example of how important retreat is, how important self-care is, how important
Yes.
self-analysis is,
Mm-hmm.
self-study is. So for me, it became psychotherapy was my sort of place that I found the time. I mean, it sounds kind of strange, but you pay a person and they do get to advise you, but they kind of have to be quiet.
Yeah.
It's really all time just for you, which
Yeah.
is, you know, a safe place because in a friendship, it's give and take and it needs to be give and take.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times in grief when you need it to be all about you. And
Yep.
that's kind of unfair to ask a friend to do, or a non-trained clergy, or a
Right.
non-trained funeral service provider, you know,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's not a funeral service provider or
Right.
somebody who's not a therapist. It's hard to ask somebody. And even for us, there's a reason why therapy might be an hour long,
Right.
or your time with your pastor might be a couple of hours long. He's
Yep.
not going to move in with you. She's not going to move in with you, right? So even they have to still take care of their family. And
Yeah.
that's an important balance. So I would say look at how you talk to yourself. If you
Mm-hmm.
criticize yourself for taking 10 to 15-minute break to get water and go to the bathroom in the middle of your morning shift at work, and you just keep working like a dog all the way through your 8 hours, there's an imbalance going on in your own head. You learned that you weren't allowed to matter somewhere,
Yeah.
and you do matter. So that means you do get to go to the bathroom and not stretch out your your bladder, and you do get to have water and not stress yourself, and you do get to take a lunch and rest your brain, and you
Yeah.
do get to stop work at a certain hour and go home and enjoy rest and dinner with your family or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
may look like, or study or sleep or whatever your nighttime looks like or your
Yeah.
weekend looks like. It's important to have that time and that balance in self-care.
Yeah.
So look at how you talk to yourself. If you're
Yeah.
critical of yourself, you need to talk to your critic and tell it it's time. Act like your own best parent to yourself
Yeah.
and tell your critic
Mm-hmm.
it's being kind of mean and knock it off. Cut it out.
Yep.
It's not helpful for
Yeah.
you to criticize me all the time. And then make room for yourself and what you want to do, what you're willing to do, how you need nurturing.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of this is, again, so often we think that there's maybe a magic pill or something I can just pick up and do and stuff. And it is just this ongoing life building kind of
Right,
thing.
right,
That's what I hear you talking about with this.
right,
We change our language,
right.
changing our language then opens up space where we can add something else that is life enhancing, and it
Yes,
just builds one piece after another, which is what we're doing in grief, is growing out of that incredible loss that we've had
yes, yes.
to be able to step
Absolutely.
forward into a new kind of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
self-care then is
Right.
such an important part, because I hear you say again that it can create boundaries, it can create a direction for
Mm-hmm.
us in that.
Mm-hmm. When you said step out of the dirt, I thought about my friend she's another grief specialist, and she has a tattoo that says, no mud, no lotus.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Great
No mud,
Buddhist
no lotus.
Great Buddhist statement and everything. Yeah,
Yes.
without the
Without the
mess.
mud. Yeah.
Yeah,
So there is a chance in grief I mean, I don't necessarily buy into this belief that everything has for a reason. And I
yeah,
really
yeah,
don't. I've seen too many tragedies to
yeah.
feel like that makes sense to me.
Right.
So if that works for you out there and you're listening, great. It just personally doesn't work for me. But I don't believe people's loved one died so that they can learn some magical lesson,
Yeah,
especially if your loved one died suddenly, young, in a tragic way,
yeah.
in a preventable way. I know we all eventually have to face our death. That is the life cycle.
Right.
But there's so much of it happens young, early,
Mm-hmm.
sudden, preventably, etc. So in those moments, I'm not saying there's learning lessons and that's why your loved one died. And you will learn,
Yeah,
regardless of this, meaning you will learn about yourself. You'll learn about others. And hopefully you'll learn to take better care of yourself
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you need it and you deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah, you need it and deserve it. And I think that's one of the things that again, when we've suffered an incredible loss, there's kind of this conundrum there because oftentimes it is, why did this happen to me?
Right.
I mean, you were talking earlier about um, grief and it can feel selfish. Ultimately, it is.
It
Ultimately,
needs to
grief
be.
is very selfish in the sense of because love is selfish. This
Yeah.
relationship that you have with that person, that's a one of a kind, that's a unique. You want that one and you want to, and you're not
Yes.
done with it,
No.
you know.
No.
And so there is a selfishness to it. And so, how do I feed myself? How do I fill
Yes.
myself? How do I
Yes.
find myself in this new way to move forward? And these are, I think that's a great opening question,
Right.
maybe for this whole self-care kind of thing.
Right. How do
Kind
I
of
find myself?
right, right.
Yeah.
Going back to your first question, what's this new life that I
Yes.
want to see and all.
Yes.
We do get presented with that, especially in the case of like a spouse dying.
Yes. Yes.
And now it's like I couldn't have imagined anything else
Right.
without them.
Right.
Um, a widow said to my wife one time, she said, I never expected to not be married,
Yes. Right.
and so have those expectations. So how do we find something new?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear it. I never expected to be a young widow. I never expected to be an only sibling. I never
Yes.
expected my parents to die this early. And I
Hmm.
had more learning to do,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
all of those missing mentors and missing moments in your life leave a big hole. No
Yeah.
wonder we're stressed, and no wonder we need to take good care of ourselves.
Yeah.
I was thinking about resiliency research as you were talking about why me. And
Hmm.
one of the three things we find in resiliency research is resilient people know that bad things happen to most people, that life is hard, and they don't focus a lot on asking why me. They focus more on what next.
What next? Okay.
What next? They
Hmm.
also focus not on you need to change to help me feel better. They focus on what's in my sphere of influence. How can I make a difference in my world? What's under my purview versus something that's across the world when I have no family over there or people over there to help and I'm not doing
Right.
a mission over there.
Right. Hmm.
Or what's happening in the other neighborhood, right? So what's in my sphere of influence to, even if it is a world issue, do I use my voice? Do I talk to my political representatives? do i
Yeah.
do I advocate for myself? So
Yeah.
what's in, I've had grieving parents where a death is because of pedestrian
Mm.
accident of their children, and they've invested in making their neighborhood safer and
Yeah.
getting stop signs put up and better markings for pedestrian and walking guards in areas that affect school children. So they've used their sphere of influence to create more safety for other people.
Okay. Hmm.
And then the other thing that so they ask what's next, they look at what's the sphere of influence, and the third thing that resilient people practice regularly is gratitude.
Mm.
Not what I don't have, but
Yeah.
what I do have that meets my needs, meets my expectation, helps me feel grateful and thankful. Because Thich Nhat Hanh is
Hmm.
he died, but he's
Yeah.
a
Buddhist
Tibetan
monk.
Buddhist monk,
Hmm.
and he would say that when you can walk outside and breathe fresh air, when you can drink water, that's you can access drinkable water, when you can access food or shelter, that's a lot of gratitude. And even
Hmm.
when you have somebody willing to show up and be with you, even if they don't say the right thing all the time or do the right thing, they're just willing to be with you in your grief
Yeah.
and just show up and witness what you're going through. That's a lot of doing. And that's a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah.
It's just having people show up 3 months later, 6 months later, 5 years later, and say, "Hey, your 5 year anniversary is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're doing to honor your loved one?" Or, "Oh, the other day I just thought about your son or boyfriend or sibling,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember when we did this thing with them and it made me
Beautiful.
smile." And sharing those stories
Yeah.
with someone who's grieving can be such a healing balm.
Uh-huh.
BALM. Those are the kinds
Yes.
of balms I like
Yeah.
in my life. Balms.
Yeah.
A healing balm to the heart is, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not the only one that
Mm-hmm.
remembers this person.
Right.
And so sometimes you can't find people to do that. So writing down your memories and revisiting them is a
Mm.
part of self care,
Right.
right?
Right.
Creating ritual for yourself is a part of self care.
Yeah.
Doing a gratitude list is a part of self care.
Right. Right. So I think what I hear is really so much not things to do in self-care. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we can all find those
There
things,
are
and
things.
unfortunately, and yeah, sometimes that is a part of it, but unfortunately, then oftentimes when you're depleted, it just becomes one more thing to do, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
get to do it then.
That's right.
Self-care really begins in an attitude and
Yes.
begins in understanding and directing ourselves in
Right.
a new way,
Right.
new
If you
self-understanding.
if you have no money and very little time, you can take care of yourself all day long by saying, "Honey, I love you. I
Mm,
see what you're going through, and I'm here with you." It costs nothing, it takes no time, and it's one of the best self-esteem and self-care builders you can do is just
yes.
talk to yourself lovingly. "I love you. I'm proud of you. I know
Mm,
this is hard. I see you and I hear you. You're special to me. It's not what you do, but who you are that I love."
wow. Wow. Yeah. It's who you
That
are.
takes no money.
Yep.
That takes no money and
No
very
money.
little time. It's just
Yeah.
training your brain
Yeah.
to give you all those loving messages that maybe you need more of right now.
Yeah, right, right. You need that self-compassion, you need that care. And
Yeah.
that's what it is when we're feeling so depleted. Oh, Michelle, thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. I want to
You're
thank you
welcome.
so much for this great wisdom and really debunking almost is a word I want to use, debunking this idea that it's, adding these different things into our life and stuff so I can feel better. No, it really is compassionate care
Mm-hmm.
for each of us as individuals as we're grieving. And what a beautiful message we need.
Thank you.
And there's that wonderful smile. I thank you so much for sharing that
My
here
pleasure.
with us today. And thank everybody who's joined us here, be it in real time or sometime in the future when you are having the opportunity to participate in this. We hope that you found something very, very helpful, some good information, something that will maybe just give you a step in the right direction. Nothing's going to fix any of it, but just a step in the right direction that will help you move forward in your grief. I also want to send out my thanks to Jessica for monitoring the feed and for doing so much on this page. She's such a great support and help to all of us as we work through our grief on this page. And we would invite each and every one of you to follow us on Facebook so that we can be together in our journey through grief. So we send you peace as you grieve your loss and look forward to being with you next time.